Welcome Internet to Psychoanalytic Talk, and today I wanted to talk about a concept that Rollo May put forward in Power and Innocence, which is the concept of power itself. So the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because Rollo May has his own specific version of it, and I think it's very rich and interesting, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today. And this is also why I'm not calling this a psychoanalytic cogitation, as it's not necessarily just my thinking, but it's more a presentation of what Rollo May thought of power. So for May, power was and is not a negative. Quite the opposite, it's a positive. Because for him, power is something of a birthright of every single human. That's part of our humanity, is power. So you might think it's odd because power has been depicted as something, a force for evil almost, or something that's absolutely corrupt and corruptible, that anything that is good that comes into contact with power gets in a way evil or becomes evil because of the effects of power. For May, this is not the case. For May, he has a different version of it. For him, power at the root cause is the capacity for every single one of us to make an impact upon the world. And that's his core idea, that power, regardless of the level of it, is our ability to make an impact on others. And that's something that I find very refreshing as a take, because power has been so pushed as something that's fundamentally bad that he reintegrates it into something good, something that's part of us in a way that is so refreshing. And he says that there's a major problem is that people who should be spreading the awareness of our power, our ability, often despise it, think that it's going to be the downfall of an individual to seek power, to help, to try and create a community, whereas power should just become completely abstract. He even calls it pseudo-innocence, because those people that push away power are like, oh, I don't have power, I don't want to talk about power. When they have a platform, they can talk, they can influence. And he said that this is the fundamental core of pseudo-innocence, is believing that you don't have any power, and even discouraging others from exerting power or influence because you think it's a bad thing. So it's a very interesting, very thorough take on power. And what I liked about it is that for him, he extends the idea of power into action. But that action for him is in two camps. It's all the impact. The impact for May being that we can create a difference, we can create change, we can create something else. That fundamental power is also intrinsically linked with hope. The hope that something better can come of it. That our impact also defines the point of view we have on the world and allows us to imprint a part of ourselves onto the world. For example, very, very simply, when I make these videos, I am using my power both as a clinical psychologist, giving me an air of authority that you can of course challenge. I'm not trying to say I am the authority, but it gives me some form of authority to transmit something to you, to say this idea looks interesting, and to give it a little more credence than if I was not a psychologist. That doesn't mean I'm not wrong or that I don't say things that are erroneous, but it means that there's some form of power that I'm using here. And the fact that you're listening to me does impact you in a way or in another. Or you agree with me, or you disagree, or you're neutral, but it does have an impact on you. Very simple. So, but you have also that power. When you're in your community, when you're interacting with other people, when you're basically being with family, that power is also within you. And all forms of power, even the high top, is an extension of this, that we are impacting our world. The problem comes with power is when it becomes violence. Because for me, violence is not aggression. There are two different things. Violence is the impact of what he calls pseudo-power. It's because you feel completely unable to make a difference in any other way that you're going to resort to violence. In a way, it reminds me of how we French psychologists and psychoanalysts think of violence. In France, there is this idea that violence is because you don't have the words to express what is happening to you. That it's so overwhelming that it translates into hurting others. Here you see the fist. That's how it works. You don't have the words, therefore it transforms into a form of violence, of destructivity. And this is a bit like what May is stating, that when you feel that you have no power, no agency over the world, because that's also the point, is that your agency is denied when you can't make an impact on the world, when you feel that you don't have an impact on the world. Therefore, what is going to happen at that moment is you're going to resort to violence to make that impact, to force other people to see you as a person, to use your power and to see that you have power, because on an unconscious level you feel that you're devoid of it. Therefore you can only resort to violence to see that. And that's, I think, is something that's very true, and notably in antisocial behaviors, is that those people, when you get into them to tell you their history, they often have been abused, neglected, hurt, broken, violented, and the only way they can resort to anything of an agency upon the world is to hurt others in a way as they have been hurt, but also to show to others that they exist, that they're showing that they're being. Of course, this is an oversimplification and overgeneralization, but it's to get the point across of how power becomes violence when we have no longer the means of expressing our impact on others, or to translate into words what we feel. That violence is not in of itself power. And he even goes so far as to call it pseudo power, because it's not really power. You're not exerting power, you're just using violence. No one's going to listen to you. You might have an era of pseudo power, but it's going to come collapsing because it's not a recognized power. Now, when it comes to the states, because that's when we think of power, we think of states, corporations, and so on and so forth. Those hold immense power, but they are more cynical about it. They might masquerade in terms of corporations as pseudo innocence, as trying to be one of the other people saying we don't have any power, but they do, and they know it. And they fundamentally, at their core, know it. It's just pretense. In those cases, which are very interesting, the state exerts power and violence, and even it has a monopole of violence because it has to enforce some form of ruling. However, for May, once you start resorting to violence, you've inevitably fail, because basically violence is just an admission of failure. Very interesting idea in of itself. And what he says about people that are thirsty for power or lust for power is that those people that lust for it because they haven't been able to make an impact. Their agency is lacking. The only way they can express anything is not through love, creativity, kindness, care. No, they can't do that. Therefore, the only way left is through enforcing power. I'm sorry, my phone rang. Anyway, that enforcing of power is something at its core that is so brutal for them, because they have no other way of expressing anything, that they're going to use power to enforce catastrophic events, like, for example, dictators or people that are going to enforce rules that are going to hurt others. All of that is bounded by the fact that they cannot, at their very core, according to May, express it in any other way, that they have been so devoid of agency that they use the only agency they have to hurt others. I don't say that this is always the case, or there's not a lot of nuance to be had in those debates, because of course there is. I'm not trying to say this is the truth. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is that I think May's point is very interesting, because it's true that often people that hurt other people do it because they themselves have been hurt. It's very, very common. And I think there is a grain of truth in what he's saying. And that's why I'm presenting it here now, because I feel that it's very important. I think it's also important that we conceive that maladaptive power, it's my words, not his, but maladaptive power as a deviation from natural or standard power, which is what we all use all the day, all the time, to be able to make an imprint upon the world, and try and make the world a better place. Well, when people say that and do it or try to do it, that's what they're doing, or you're doing, is that you're leaving the world in a better place. You're using your power in a constructive way, and that's exactly what May says, is that we shouldn't be ashamed or afraid of power. We should grasp it to try and make the best difference we can at every single level. And if ever we have that maladaptive power, we have to be able to confront it as being maladaptive and being wrong in the way that it hurts others rather than helps others. And of course, this is all very, how can I say, utopian, as we all know that there's the death drive, this stuff that makes us constantly in conflict. That doesn't mean that there isn't something to be sought out in the fact of trying to use our power. And he also says something that I didn't insist on when I was doing the review, but at our core, us humans, we're rebels. We want to use our power, and we want to show others we don't conform to exactly what the world is. And I think that that's very true. And that power is also creativity in essence. And we want to show and distinguish ourselves from others. As much as we want to connect from them, we want to show them that we are part. It's that beautiful paradoxicality of humankind, but yet it's so very interesting. And to round it all out to power, is that power is as good as it is bad. It's just something we have to struggle with and determine for ourselves and make something of it for ourselves. And I think there is nothing worse for the mind, or nothing worse, maybe a bit hyperbolic here, but one of the worst things for the mind is to feel that you can make no difference, that your actions are meaningless. Because that, I think, triggers a response of complete despair. And when I'm in despair, I don't mean like depression, you're in your bed and it's hard to even do something. That can be the case, but I also think of all those acts of violence, hatred, crime and destruction that also occur because of that fundamental helplessness. So I think that May is really onto something, and I hope that I was able to elaborate and transmit to you his focal point on power, because I find it very interesting. And of course, and as always, if you found this video interesting or you want to ask a question, please feel free to leave a comment. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.